the observance day today, but it's also Tuesday, so we have a few questions have come in, which we can endeavour to answer. So the first question tonight is, what advice would you give to a Buddhist who is close to their death? Well, if it's a Buddhist who's close to their death, hopefully they have some established faith in the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, the Buddha and his teachings, the Dhamma, which explains the Noble Eightfold Path, the Ariyamagga, which leads to the end of suffering and is what we have to develop through our life as Buddhists. And the Sangha, those people who have dedicated their lives to that practice. So that's one thing you can draw energy from and draw inspiration and strength from, especially at times when you're sick or facing the end of your life. So recollecting the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, recollecting the Buddha, whether it's as a meditation or samatha meditation, reciting the word Buddho, recollecting the qualities of the Buddha, chanting iti piso as we just chanted just then when we chanted the Parittas. It's a good way to recollect the Buddha. And even if you're close to death, if you can still remember the Buddha's word, Buddha's name, Buddha, Buddho, or recite quietly to yourself the word Buddho, or recite the chant iti piso, it's a good way to bring up mindfulness, keep the mind in the present moment, not fall into negative or unskillful states of mind. Stop the mind proliferating, worrying, doubting, getting caught into anger and so on. So that's a very good starting point. If the person doesn't have much experience with meditation, then recollecting past good deeds is a very skillful way to brighten the mind, to bring up wholesome, skillful states of mind. So that could be acts of dana, charity, generosity, supporting Sangha and the religion, acts of dana in society, and of course helping family and friends, helping that person to recollect the good that they've done in their life, will help to uplift and brighten their mind, give their life some meaning at a time when they may be concerned that they're going to lose their life very quickly or soon. Also to recollect sila, having lived in a moral way, keeping 5 precepts, 8 precepts, the lack of regret, the happiness that brings, the practice of kindness towards others. Again, this uplifts the mind and counters the tendency to dwell on our faults and our mistakes. We sometimes remember with regret or guilt less skillful behaviour. And we also have to remember our skillful behaviour and make that prominent, bring it up in the mind. If the person has a foundation in meditation, we'll get them just to keep practicing meditation as much as possible, bring up the mindfulness, whether it's recollecting the Buddha, Buddho, 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 or the breathing meditation, anapanasati, which if somebody is still conscious, they've always got their breath, however laboured or difficult the breath is becoming at the end of their life, they can still use it as a basis for cultivating mindful awareness, letting go of the 5 hindrances, letting go of unskillful states of mind. And I think if there's somebody who are already experienced in meditation, they'll know what to do because they've done it through their life maybe. If someone is less experienced in meditation, well, just encourage them to put their attention on their breathing and let go of everything else. Keep the mind in a good space, following the breath, letting go of worries about the future, regrets about the past, practicing loving kindness as well towards all beings, and just keep the mind as in the present moment with mindfulness and in a wholesome state, and just contemplate the impermanence of everything. And this body ultimately must die, we all must die. So to accept that by seeing it's just natural, it's the impermanent nature of the body, it's just natural, it's part of nature. And it will have to go back to nature. The elements, earth, air, fire, water that make up this body will break apart. It's inevitable. So not to worry about it, not to concern yourself about it. And the same with our loved ones. We have to separate from them when we die, so accept that. Recollect other people with goodness and their good qualities, but accept one day we must separate from them, from our possessions and property and all the things we love and like in this world. We have to separate, but just accept that by contemplating the impermanence of these things, and bring the mind to focus on the present moment and accept the impermanence of the body and the arising and ceasing of thoughts and feelings and perceptions. And this is the way we bring our mind to peace, and we do that. As long as we're conscious, we can do that right to the end of our life. Of course, the best preparation for death is practice when you're still alive and healthy. You're not leaving it to the last moment when you're on a deathbed, say. But while you're younger, healthier, stronger, put effort into your practice. One of the practices Luang Por Chah talked about is dying before you die. So when you practice meditation, you're dying before you die, meaning you're practicing dying. But what you're letting die is the mental defilements of greed, anger, and delusion, which are coming out of ignorance. Let them die. And that's what you're doing when you practice mindfulness and cultivate the path of samatha vipassana, of meditation. You're seeing through the delusion of self. You're abandoning greed, anger, and delusion, which comes out of ignorance and delusion. You're letting the defilements die, and what's left is the Dhamma, seeing and knowing the truth, mindfulness, insight. So practice dying before you die. Let go of the defilements, let them die. Then your mind goes to a better place. Another question. When I meditate on the breath, I sometimes calm down and the breath becomes so subtle I can't feel it moving in or out anymore. What should I do then? Well, don't stop, don't give up, keep meditating. But you also have to observe what's going on and reflect. If the breath becomes so subtle that you can't feel it anymore when you're meditating, it tends to be as a result of one of two things. It's either because the mind is becoming dull, sleepy, dull, dark, and we've lost our mindfulness, so we're no longer aware of the breath, which is obviously not a good thing. And if you notice or observe that that's happening, then the recommendation is maybe open your eyes to wake yourself up and take a few deep breaths so you re-establish awareness on the breathing. And dullness is a regular kind of obstacle that comes up in your meditation, because as you physically are still, if you're sitting meditation, when your mindfulness drops, then you tend to go into dullness. Sometimes it's because we're physically tired. Sometimes it's just a lack of mindfulness and clear comprehension, so the mind becomes dull. And it's a hindrance and it's unwholesome. It's not to be encouraged, but it can become quite habitual. And people become so used to being dull when they sit meditation that they just go to that state quite quickly. So it's something we have to work against. Perhaps less common, but as the questioner implies, is quite possible, is we focus our mindfulness on the in and out breath, and as we do that and we're sitting still and perhaps for a longer period of time, and mindfulness is improving, the movement of the breathing in and out that we're focusing our attention on, it becomes more and more subtle, almost imperceivable, and eventually maybe seems to not be happening at all. But we're not dull, we're completely awake and aware. Perhaps if you've been focusing on one spot, whether it's the tip of the nose or the chest, for example, the movement you were paying attention to becomes so subtle it seems to not be there anymore. But you're not asleep and you're not dull, so you're now aware of the mind and the breath have merged together, as it were. And usually at that point, the mind becomes quite bright, so you actually have great perception of light arising in your mind. The mind is not sleepy, it's bright, and you have different, one or more of the factors of samadhi are there, so you have attention on the mind, sustained attention, and in piti, rapture, sukha, happiness, contentment, and one-pointedness, ekaggata. The idea is to continue to make your mindfulness very strong and maintain that state of samadhi as long as possible. And if it is stronger and your mind goes deeper, then the sense of the body may disappear. You're no longer distracted by sight, sound, taste, smell, touch, or thoughts. And the mind is just very peaceful and content, one-pointed on its object. And continue that as long as possible, because it has a very purifying effect on the mind. You're becoming used to letting go of everything, but staying mindful, alert, awake. And make your mind really firm in that and strong. If at some point, quite naturally, the mind starts to withdraw, we say, pull back from that deep state of one-pointedness, and thoughts start to emerge, and feelings and sensations in the body are becoming apparent again, then contemplate. Observe the arising and ceasing of physical sensations, thoughts and feelings arising, passing away. Whatever train of thought starts to come up, maybe that very train of thought you've asked about, what should I do now? Just observe, it's just a thought. Maintain your equanimity of mindfulness and observe the changing, transient nature of thoughts arising, ceasing. And try to maintain mindfulness so you don't get lost in the thoughts and the images or the sensations of the body, feelings of pain, whatever may be coming up. Maintain your equanimity, your mindfulness, and observe impermanence, the characteristic of impermanence in your 5 khandhas. If it seems appropriate to do something more than that, well, Ajahn Chah said, contemplate the physical body. Now that mindfulness is established, the mind is calm, one-pointed, we'll turn to contemplate the body, the 32 parts of the body. You can run through them visually and send your attention to whichever part of the body you're contemplating. Get to know your body from the inside out, what it looks like, what the sensations, and the implications of the fact that the 32 parts of the body, the 4 elements that make up each of those 32 body parts, are not a self. They're natural elements that manifest. You have the shape, the colour, any sensations you can experience around those parts, but there's no person in them. They're just component parts of this body, and the mind mistakenly says, this is me, mine, myself. So you're investigating that wrong view of the body. And this is a liberating experience. Sometimes it brings a deeper sense of peace, even deeper peace and rapture and joy than you attain just from samatha or samadhi practice. The piti and sukha that arises from vipassana can be even more profound, and has a sense of letting go of attachment to the body, the mind knowing the body but without any strong attachment or identification with it. And this can help to subdue greed, anger, delusion, the mental defilements, and eventually will lead on to Margapala Nibbana. So there's plenty more to do when you attain a state of one-pointedness and the breath seems to disappear. You can contemplate. And this is where insight will arise. Another question. Dear Luang Por, help, with an exclamation mark. My nephew is currently in a relationship with a lady he met over a dating site. Since then he has changed and has become very sensitive and reserved. We met the girlfriend recently. She doesn't want to work, expects him to spend on her and have a good time, and he cooks and washes and cleans for her. We tried to talk to him, but he is very prickly and protective and said we are unfair. Please advise us, Luang Por. We know she is not for him and will only make his life miserable if they get married. We only want his happiness and well-being. How should we address this problem? By the way, he is 29 and has a good job. From a concerned family. Well, there's many different areas of life that bring up problems: work, relationships, family, money. This is part of living in the world and the challenge of living in the world. So our starting point is our own personal practice, the sort of things I was talking about earlier. Cultivating good sila, living in an ethical way where you're not harming others through your speech, your actions. Cultivating mindfulness on a regular basis and contemplating the impermanent and lack of self in experience. That's your starting point. So as you address, say, family issues like a nephew who has himself a new girlfriend who you don't approve of or don't think is the right person. Well, there's plenty to investigate there. First is, establish awareness of any emotions you're experiencing. Your anger, disappointment, aversion for the girl, annoyance that your nephew is not listening to you. Observe that in yourself first. How are you reacting? And the Buddha said when we want to instruct or advise or make suggestions to someone, maybe a family member like this, you have to remove anger from your mind first. So if you're angry and you want to go and tell them what is what, that's going to have a negative effect. It won't give you the outcome you want because the anger will push the listener away and maybe diminish the power of your argument, and whatever understanding you have will be diminished. It won't be coming across so well if you're coming from anger. So you have to establish your mind in metta, goodwill, and that's for both of them, the boyfriend and girlfriend. Because once you're coming from a place of metta, maybe that makes you more open to listening to their point of view, seeing things from a different angle, makes you more sensitive, maybe allows you to let go of any strong opinions you're holding that may not all be completely coming from a place of mindfulness and wisdom. I don't know the people involved here, so I can't really say one way or the other who is right for who and what's the proper thing, but I do know when you give into your own anger and attach to your strong views, it kind of blinds you to the truth, and it doesn't help with relations within the family. And you also have to accept, once you establish loving kindness and mindfulness for your nephew, you might have to accept, well, he's his own person, he's 29, so he's an adult. He has his own rights to make choices, even if you don't agree with them and don't think they're the wisest or best choices in life, his life. He's another person, isn't it? Family brings up this attachment to self. So it's my family, my parents, my children, my nephew, my brother, my sister, my husband, my wife. That sense of my can be very deluding sometimes, and it leads on to all forms of suffering. Greed, anger and delusion leads to suffering. So that sense of me, mine, myself in your experience is not coming from wisdom. So if you can establish mindfulness and look at this problem from a place of equanimity and cool, calm, wise reflection as much as possible, it'll both help you to understand what's going on, think about the best way to help your nephew, the best words, or maybe allow you to accept something that is hard to accept and you just have to wait. Sometimes your nephew may end up living the rest of his life with this person, or maybe he'll decide later that it's not the right person and come to his own conclusion. All you can do is suggest, make suggestions, express your love, your concerns, and then you have to wait and see what happens next with your nephew. You can also meditate on the whole problem, do your own meditation, and send your thoughts of loving kindness to your nephew, for him to be protected, for him to be successful in his life. And then also see what happens, whether this leads to any change or not. You have to accept that. And ultimately we can't control another person so much. We can only suggest, advise, and then you have to wait for them to think it through. And maybe he'll decide he still wants to be with this person, and you have to accept that. This is the practice of metta leading on to upekkha, equanimity, where other people make their choices that you may not agree with, but it's their choice to make those choices. If they choose to go a certain way, they don't listen to you or they don't agree with you, well, you may have to accept that. But you can, as I said, practice metta, talk to them, listen to them, meditate. When you're on your own, you meditate and send your thoughts of loving kindness for his protection, his success, and then you have to wait and see what happens next. Now you know why the monk's life is such a pleasant life. No worries about marriage and partners and children and all these things. You can relate to the world with just as Dhamma, and don't have to deal maybe with some of these problems. Or if you're dealing with them, you deal from a place of Dhamma. This last question is one of, it's from someone it's in Thai. So I'll answer in Thai first and then I'll give you some translation in English. คำถามมีเรื่องหนึ่งถ้ารู้สึกว่าจิตมันอ่านลายมือยากมันมากแต่แปลกๆความรู้สึกว่าอยากจะควักหัวใจออกมาอันนี้คือสภาวะแบบไหนคะเวลานั่งสมาธิอยากจะควักหัวใจออกมา ก็เป็นความรู้สึกอันหนึ่งเป็นความคิดความรู้สึกอันหนึ่งอาจจะเกิดจากจิตที่ยังไม่สงบยังไม่นิ่งยังไม่มีสติต่อเนื่องความรู้สึกอันนี้เกิดขึ้นถ้าสติดีก็แค่รู้ว่าเป็นความรู้สึกความคิดเกิดขึ้นตั้งอยู่ดับไปจบถ้าลึกกว่านั้นสมาธิเกิดขึ้นความรู้สึกอันนี้จะหายไปแต่ในขณะที่เราหัดฝึกสติจะมีความรู้สึกความคิดแปลกๆหลายสิ่งหลายอย่างเรื่องอดีตเรื่องอนาคตเรื่องปัจจุบันเรื่องร่างกายหรือความทุกข์ความดีใจความเสียใจสารพัดจะขึ้นมาถ้าสติอ่อนเราจะตามความรู้สึกนั้นอาจจะเกิดความสงสัยหรือเกิดอารมณ์ใดอารมณ์หนึ่งทำให้จิตปรุงแต่งไปอาจจะไม่สงบอาจจะฟุ้งซ่านไปแต่ถ้าเราตั้งสติได้แล้วเราจะพิจารณาความรู้สึกที่เกิดขึ้นว่าเป็นธรรมมันเป็นสภาวะที่เกิดขึ้นตั้งอยู่ดับไปแล้วก็ไม่ใช่บุคคลไม่ใช่เราไม่ใช่เขาไม่ใช่ตัวตนก็ปล่อยวางไปเป็นธรรมชาติถ้าเรามีความทุกข์สะสมมา ความทุกข์เรื่องชีวิตบางทีความทุกข์เกี่ยวกับความรักหรือความทุกข์เกี่ยวกับความผิดหวังหรือความทุกข์ในอดีตเราเคยถูกคนอื่นรังแกหรือบีบคั้นอะไรอย่างใดอย่างหนึ่งเวลามานั่งสมาธิบางทีมันจะขึ้นมาเป็นวิบากกรรมจะมีความรู้สึกเจ็บหน้าอกเป็นผลกรรมจากอดีตก็กำลังให้ผลในขณะที่เรานั่งสมาธิจิตใจก็ละเอียดขึ้นสติสมาธิดีขึ้นละเอียดขึ้นบางทีจะสังเกตมีความเจ็บปวดสะสมมาเราก็ต้องเจริญเมตตากับตัวเองแล้วก็ตั้งสติแล้วก็พิจารณาเป็นแค่ความรู้สึกที่เราต้องอดทนไปแล้วก็ปล่อยวางมีเหตุของมันในอดีตเป็นได้หรือบางทีอาจจะมีความรู้สึกทุกข์กับร่างกายความรู้สึกว่าร่างกายมีคนหนึ่งเขานั่งสมาธิที่นี่แล้วเกิดความรู้สึกเขารังเกียจร่างกายตัวเองร่างกายเป็นเรื่องที่เป็นสิ่งที่สกปรกแล้วก็เป็นสิ่งที่หนักแล้วก็เป็นสิ่งที่ให้ความทุกข์เสมอเขาก็เลยเกิดความรู้สึกแอนตี้ไม่ชอบร่างกายตัวเอง ก็เป็นได้จะรู้สึกอยากจะทำลายร่างกายหรือให้ส่วนใดส่วนหนึ่งของร่างกายออกไปหรือบางทีคนก็เคยมีความสุขมากๆรักคนใดคนหนึ่งแต่ความสุขอันนี้ค่อยๆเปลี่ยนไปหายไปเปลี่ยนเป็นความทุกข์หรือก็หัวใจก็รู้สึกปีบเวลาคนที่เรารักไม่รักเราแล้วหรือเราเองไม่รักเขาแล้วเขาไม่ทำตามเราแล้วไม่สนใจเราแล้วหรือเราไม่สนใจเขาแล้วบางทีหัวใจก็รู้สึกปีบทุกข์รู้สึกเจ็บก็เป็นได้ก็อาจจะมีหลายสาเหตุที่อาจจะเกิดความรู้สึกอย่างนี้แต่ที่เราจะรู้แน่ๆก็คือเป็นความรู้สึกที่เกิดขึ้นทั้งอยู่ตั้งไปให้ดูไปรับรองถ้าเราภาวนาไปเรื่อยๆความรู้สึกจะควักหัวใจออกไปมันจะค่อยๆหมดไปแล้วจิตจะตั้งมั่นในสมาธิแล้วก็พิจารณาเห็นความไม่เที่ยงของกายของใจของขันธ์ห้าความรู้สึกอันนี้จะหมดไปSo there was a question about the practice of meditation. This person has been meditating regularly through the last 3 months of the rains, and at one point they had a very strange feeling like they wanted to pull their heart out of their body. This is actually there's a saying, like it's the sort of thing sometimes people mention in songs and poems and things when you fall in love with someone. It's like pull your heart out. Sometimes when you're suffering from love, you want to pull your heart out. It's a sign of strong emotion, love or hate, based on an attachment to another person maybe. But in this case, I think it's just one feeling that comes up during meditation. It can be the result of accumulated attachment to another person, and that's caused pain, and we often feel pain in the chest area. So it's a mixture of emotional pain, but also manifesting in the body. As we're meditating, we notice it. Maybe normally you don't notice it, but when you meditate, it comes out. Painful feeling, maybe you want to get rid of your heart, pull it out. I was also mentioning it might not be from an emotional thing about love and hate for another person, but it can also be a feeling that comes up as you become more mindful of your body. You also get some sense of aversion or tiredness towards your body, your mind, your consciousness is kind of stuck inside this body, which is a source of pain, suffering. Sometimes we contemplate to see the repulsive side of the body, and then you get strange reactions. Sometimes you want to pull your heart out or destroy your own body or something. People have all different kinds of thoughts and feelings pop into the mind as they meditate. But if you keep meditating on your main meditation object, if that may be the breath or Buddha, you'll find these feelings and sensations that come up and these thoughts that come up will pass. They arise, they pass away, and that's what you can know about them. They're just temporary mental states, feelings. They arise, they pass away. And you'll find eventually they don't arise anymore if you keep meditating and keep coming back to mindfulness. The second question. คำถามนอนสมาธิเจ้าค่ะตอนนั้นรู้สึกได้ว่าลมค่อยๆหายและมีความสว่างขาแขนรู้สึกว่าร่างกายหายแต่นั่งไม่เคยรู้สึกแบบนี้เลยอันนี้คือสภาวะแบบไหนก็เลยสภาวะแบบนี้ร่างกายหายเกิดในช่วงที่นอนทำสมาธิก่อนหนึ่งอาจจะหายเพราะเราหลับเรา นอนสมาธิบางทีสมาธิมันอ่อนสติอ่อนก็หลับง่ายแต่ว่านั่งนอนสมาธิได้ถ้าสมาธิเกิดในขณะที่นอนอยู่ในอิริยาบถท่านอนก็อาการของปิติก็บางทีกายหายความรู้สึกหนักของร่างกายหรือเจ็บปวดก็หายกายเบานอนก็รู้สึกสบายกับความเจ็บปวดหรือความรู้สึกของกายหายไปก็เป็นอาการของปิติที่สำคัญเราต้องพยายามกำหนดสติอยู่ที่อารมณ์กรรมฐานของเราถ้ากำหนดที่ลมหรือท่องพุทโธก็ท่องไปเรื่อยๆไม่ขาดไม่ให้ขาดสติปกติเราไม่แนะนำให้นอนสมาธิแต่ว่าเป็นธรรมดาก่อนนอนเราก็ต้องนอนหรือตื่นเช้าก็อยู่ในท่านอนหรือบางที่เราป่วยลุกขึ้นไม่มีแรงก็เลยนอนสมาธิโอเคในช่วงนั้นเราก็ฝึกสมาธิในท่านอนก็ได้บางที่ก็ได้ผลเหมือนกันแต่เราต้องระวังเพราะว่าหลับง่ายขาดสติแล้วก็หลับเลยเป็นธรรมดาก็เลยลุกขึ้นนั่งดีกว่าแต่ที่ว่านั่งสมาธิไม่ค่อยรู้สึกกายร่างกายหายก็แสดงว่ายังไม่ถึงจุดเราต้องทำต่อนั่งสมาธิเราต้องฝึกสติอยู่กับอารมณ์ถ้าอยู่กับลมหายใจเข้าออกอยู่กับลมจนกระทั่งไม่คิดอย่างอื่นเลยจิตนิ่งสงบอาการของปีติสุขจะเริ่มเกิดขึ้นแล้วก็อาจจะมีอาการกายหายเหลือแต่ใจที่รับรู้เป็นได้ต้องฝึกไปเรื่อยๆแต่ก่อนนอนเราก็กำหนดสติในอิริยาบถนอนได้ไม่ผิดถ้าเป็นสมาธิแล้วในท่านอนก็อาจจะไม่หลับเลยนอนไปเรื่อยๆพอจิตตื่นจิตสว่างก็ไม่เป็นไรไม่ต้องกังวลทำนอนไม่หลับเพราะมีสมาธิก็ไม่เป็นไรไม่ได้เป็นสิ่งที่ไม่ดีเพียงอีกวันหนึ่งอาจจะเพลียก็ไม่เป็นไรอีกวันหนึ่งเราคอยพักเพิ่มขึ้นเป็นเวลาเพิ่มขึ้นThere was a question about practicing samadhi or mindfulness in the lying down posture. So this practitioner has experienced samadhi when they were lying down and the factors of samadhi arose, so they have mindfulness and then piti and sukha. And one of the qualities of piti is that the body becomes very light and then seems to disappear. So all that's left is the mind, knowing, but the body, the sensations of the body, any pain, any feelings of heat and cold and all of that disappears. And that's not unusual. We don't usually recommend to do a lot of meditation in the lying down posture because it's so easy to fall asleep. It's hard to maintain mindfulness, but nevertheless, before you fall asleep at night, say when you're lying down, then practice mindfulness. So if you do mindfulness of breathing, or follow the breathing until you fall asleep. But occasionally you might find your mind lets go of the body and goes into samadhi in the lying down posture. And then you won't sleep at all, or it may take a long time for you to fall asleep because your mind is bright and the hindrances have passed away and you're able to maintain that state of samadhi for a while lying down. And that's good, so it's okay to practice that. But the questioner was saying they've never experienced this when they've been sitting meditation. Of course, when you're sitting up, you're putting effort forth, and often you have the desire to be mindful, to be successful, to be peaceful, and often the desire for success and for results in the practice can be an obstacle for the mind settling down on the breath, and the factors of samadhi don't fully arise, so this person hasn't experienced the body disappearing when they were sitting meditation, but they have when lying down. So I think it's just a matter of to keep practicing and refining and improving the level of mindfulness on the breathing not let the 5 hindrances overtake the mind, but practice letting go of everything, focusing the mind on the breath, and then the different factors of samadhi, piti, sukha, and one-pointedness will come up more often, more strongly, and for longer. And you may experience a similar state of samadhi when you're sitting meditation as you have done when lying down. So, that was the last question tonight. So we wish you all well. May you continue your practice of meditation, and may it bring you peace and understanding.